Young people's experiences, ideas, choices, and preferences help shape the future of African cities. This episode of the Bright Young Minds show on Future Cities Africa is with Leah Moodaley, a communications practitioner and content developer with 9 years multidisciplinary experience across diverse media and communication environments, predominantly within the public sector. She's currently Communications and Stakeholder Relations Officer at Coega Development Corporation. Leah, welcome. It's great to have you on the show. Give us a brief introduction to your role at Coega Development Corporation and why it is important.
I am a communications practitioner by profession. I currently work at the Coega Development Corporation, and the CDC, that's the abbreviation of the acronym, is the operator and developer of the Coega Special Economic Zone. So, my job as a communicator is to communicate the good work of the CDC, to make sure that the public is aware of vacancies, aware of property to let, and this is part and parcel of attracting investment, specifically on communicating the good work that we do, as well as the benefits of locating your business within an SEZ. And in attracting investment, this would in turn create jobs, which is ultimately the purpose of an SEZ. It's a tool to promote industrialization, job creation, and the like.
What are some of the key challenges that you face as a communicator working within the public sector, and how can these challenges be addressed?
As a communicator, specifically in the civil sector or the public sector, one's role becomes extremely complex because you are entrusted to communicate with transparency. I mean, at the end of the day, government works for the people. And what are you going to do? You're going to report back to your boss, right? So so that can become an extremely complex process because we are the Rainbow Nation, many people to speak to. How do you curate messages? But besides that, I mean, okay, besides the major challenge of load shedding, which affects the majority of the South African workforce, we have these micro challenges within our immediate environment where we sort of have to prioritize very carefully as communicators between communicating hygiene factors, which are, like things that just need to be communicated, but that don't really make an impact on the bottom line of the organization, and then things that are really strategic. And it becomes really difficult to prioritize. And I think one way of addressing that is to ensure alignment and mutual respect between your strategic operations and your strategic core functions of an organization and your center of communications. I think that mutual respect has to be there because I found, I mean, I haven't been in the communication space for that long. It's been 8, 9 years professionally. But what I can say is that communication is often seen as a support function when it plays a really integral role in the organization's success. I might be biased, but that's what I've experienced.
You've mentioned some solutions, but what is actively being done to address these challenges?
Well, yeah, in terms of solutions to a problem like that, like I've mentioned, it comes down to an alignment between your core function and your center of communications. And at the end of the day, this relies heavily on leadership, as well as the way the organization is structured. But I mean, in terms of immediate solutions, as a communicator, things that are within my ambit of control, I think it just comes down to prioritization and figuring out why I work here, what is the biggest value add, how can I make the biggest impact using my skills, and take it from there.
I'd like to know what is your approach to problem solving in your professional life and how do you prioritize what is most important?
That's a really good question because your solutions to problems are very often contextual. If you're speaking about the problems that I'm facing in a work environment, I would need to figure out how to navigate that from that perspective. In my personal life, I tend to tackle problems very directly, very head on. I think that at times I might be a bit impulsive when it comes to solving things in my personal life, but at work I am a bit more careful and professional. It would all come down to the team I work with and what we're trying to achieve as a collective.
Leah, what is your approach to continuous learning? Is it important, and how do you stay on top of new trends and developments?
I think continuous learning is extremely important. I mean, if you look at the pace of change happening around us in the world, it might not be so fast in South Africa, but if you just look at it globally, things are constantly changing. And if you want to stay relevant and if you want to stay attractive, specifically in the job market, for instance, you really need to stay abreast of everything happening. But I mean, that's okay because I think people are naturally just sponges. And with social media, with traditional media, everywhere you look, something's been thrown at you. So, I mean, I just compartmentalize information in my head, filter out what's not relevant to me in that moment, and try to just suck up as much information as possible.
Thanks. How, as a young African living in South Africa, are you currently making sense of what is going on in the world, and how do you stay sane?
Okay, staying sane. I think I can answer that part of the question in terms of how do we make sense of it all. That's a bit difficult. I can't make sense of it all. There are times where I feel very disillusioned, very confused, and it's very difficult to stay hopeful as a young person. But I would say that it's extremely important to focus on your mental health. I think the pandemic really brought that issue to the forefront and brought it to the top of people's minds. And I think that focus is here to stay, thankfully. And another thing that would help people to stay sane is to be vocal, use your voice. And I think if it's done in the right spirit, whether you use social media to blog or whether you use a journal to write, express yourself. We have so many platforms as young people to do so. And I think if we do it with a good intention and in the right spirit, it would go a long way in terms of making sense of the world around us.
Leah, what is your vision for the future of cities? Is there anything standing in the way of achieving this vision? And if so, how can these barriers be overcome?
There are two things that I would like to see. First of all, would be representation, inclusivity, women in leadership. And to a large extent, that is happening. I mean, with Women's Month, you see these campaigns, you see women being appointed to executive roles, you see it happening. So, things aren't stagnant. So that's what I'd like to see more of, specifically young females. And then another thing, very important thing, is effective and efficient governance, accountable governance. How the country is controlled, how the country is managed, and how people in charge are held to account. In terms of a solution to that, it's very difficult because I think if solutions were easy, we would have found the solution already. But I think an override button to effective governance is political involvement and then also excessive participation. I mean, democracy is a gift. Democracy is a gift to all of us. But the reality is that it slows down the machinery of government. I mean, even if you look at it from a micro level, if you have an approval process of 10 people, it's going to take longer to complete that job successfully. So, red tape and bureaucracy, they really impede our progression as a country. And if we could nip that in the bud or just find a way to be a bit more efficient and effective, I think that would be awesome for us. We have so much to offer. But I also understand that we do need to get back to basics, specifically water and electricity. we do need to just get back to basics, focus on what's important, and the rest can come afterwards.
In closing, what advice do you have for young Africans to remain hopeful of the future?
Young people need to really dig deep and realize their own power. I think that's very important. Self esteem is extremely important. More often than not, we can't really change what's happening around us, but we do have control over what's happening within us. And I think we underestimate the power that comes with a collective energy or a collective mindset. I honestly believe it might sound a bit philosophical and airy fairy, but if we work on ourselves, develop a self esteem and a true belief in oneself that I can change things, I can make an impact, and we all move in that same direction together, it will spill over and it will spread. And then on the topic of self esteem, I think as future leaders and as future parents, this is where our responsibility really starts because we need to start changing the narrative that youth can only speak when spoken to. Youth should be vocal, youth should be able to share their views and be heard. We should be able to have healthy dialogues, informal think tanks amongst friends, finding solutions with one another, even if they don't necessarily go anywhere. It's a start, and I think that's really important. My wish for Africa is just that we believe in our power because Africa has so much to offer.
A big thank you to Leah Moodaley for this insightful conversation on the Bright Young Minds show on Future Cities Africa. Youth is the future of African cities.